He was a blind stranger standing in the rain. She was a homeless girl with nothing but half a cup of noodles. What started as a quiet act of kindness turned into a war for truth betrayal and a legacy worth billions. But in a world full of lies, can someone who sees nothing see the only person who truly mattered? Stay with us, because what happens at the end will leave you speechless. If this story moved, you don't just scroll past. Hit subscribe for more true-to-heart stories like this. Leave a comment. Would you trust a stranger if they had no name, but gave you everything? Share this with someone who believes second chances can start with a cup of coffee. The rain hit hard that night in downtown Phoenix. Cold, relentless, the kind that pierced through layers like needles and turned the sidewalks into rivers. Cassie Rivera pulled her coat tighter, though coat was generous. It was a second-hand hoodie with a busted zipper stained from nights sleeping on concrete. She moved fast, scanning trash bins and alley corners for anything remotely valuable: cans, bottles, half-eaten sandwiches if she was lucky. She hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days. Her feet ached, her knuckles were raw, but she kept moving. At the corner of 7th and Jefferson, under the flickering light of a broken bus stop sign, she saw him. A man, standing still in the rain, alone. He didn't look drunk, didn't look high. He was clean-shaven, his hair damp but neatly combed. A black coat hung from his shoulders, soaked through. But it was the way he stood, straight, balanced, like he wasn't just lost. He was waiting. Cassie slowed, wary. Most people like her didn't stop. You learned to keep walking. Too many stories started with, "I thought he needed help," and ended in regret. But then he spoke. His voice was quiet, calm, almost haunting. "Can you tell me how to get to a place where no one lies?" Cassie froze. Not, "Can you spare change?" Not, "Where's the shelter?" No. He asked for something deeper, something no GPS could find. I don't think that place exists," she replied, cautious, glancing around. He turned his face toward her. That's when she saw them, his eyes, pale, slightly clouded, unblinking. He was blind. He tilted his head slightly. "Then maybe you can point me in the direction of someone who doesn't lie." Cassie hesitated, hard. She didn't trust easy, and she'd learned never to stick her neck out for strangers. But something about him didn't scream danger. He didn't beg. He didn't chase. He just stood there, soaked and waiting. "You got anywhere to go tonight?" she asked, arms crossed. "No." "Figures," she muttered. She looked around. The bus stop was empty. The shelters would be full by now. The rain wasn't letting up, and that look in his eyes, even if he couldn't see her, felt like he was reading her anyway. "Come on," she said, turning away. "But I don't do this often." He followed steps, careful, one hand brushing the edge of a cane she hadn't even noticed he carried. It tapped lightly as he moved behind her, not too close. They walked 5 blocks in silence, Cassie stealing glances now and then. He never asked her name, never said thank you. Her place was a half-collapsed storage unit behind an abandoned mechanic shop. No lock, one blanket, a space heater that sparked when plugged in. She pushed the metal door open. "It ain't much." He stepped inside, careful. Cassie lit a half-burned candle and pulled out a single cup of instant ramen. "Split it," she asked. "Only if you're hungry, too." She laughed dryly. "I'm always hungry." They sat across from each other, steam rising from the cup between them, the candlelight flickering shadows on the rusted walls. After a few bites, she asked, "What's your name?" "Elliot." "Last name?" "Just Elliot." She studied him. His face was calm expression, unreadable. But there was something about his presence, controlled, grounded, not like any street person she'd ever met. "You sure you're blind?" she asked bluntly. He didn't react, just smiled faintly. "Very." Cassie shook her head. "You talk like someone who's been to too many boardrooms." "Maybe I have." That shut her up. Outside the rain softened, but inside the storm only began to stir. Cassie didn't know why she let him in. Maybe it was his strange calm. Maybe it was the way he never pitied himself. Or maybe it was just that for once she didn't feel invisible. And Elliot, he didn't flinch at the filth. Didn't complain about the leaking roof. Didn't even ask why a girl barely 22 was sleeping on cold concrete with nothing but broken dreams and a pocket knife. Instead, he asked for nothing, and that somehow said everything. That night, as Cassie lay facing the wall, wide awake beside a stranger in the dark, she whispered to herself, "What kind of blind man asks to go where no one lies?" And for the first time in months, she didn't feel so alone. Cassie woke up before the sun did, like most mornings. Her body ached from sleeping on the cold floor, but she was used to that. What she wasn't used to was the sound of soft humming coming from the other side of the room. Elliot was already awake, sitting cross-legged near the candle hands, folded on his lap, facing the thin beam of morning light sneaking in from under the metal door. He looked peaceful, too peaceful for someone who'd spent the night surrounded by broken crates, torn blankets, and the stench of gasoline and rain. "You always wake up this early," Cassie mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "I don't sleep much," he said calmly. Too many thoughts. She tossed on her hoodie, sat up, and narrowed her eyes at him. "You think too much for a blind man." He just smiled. "I think because I can't see. Makes the world less chaotic." But to Cassie, he was chaos. Or at least the start of something different. And different was dangerous. The more days passed, the more Elliot didn't fit. He didn't act like someone who had nothing. He didn't move like someone helpless. He always listened. Really listened, not just to her words, but to her silences. When she tried to lie about being fine, he'd tilt his head and say, "You didn't breathe after that sentence. Are you sure you're okay?" How did he know that? How did he know anything? One evening, while she was eating from a half-opened can of chili she'd found behind a diner, her wristwatch fell to the floor. A cheap plastic one, from a donation bin. Its ticking had faded days ago. "Dead again," she muttered. Elliot reached out. "Can I?" She hesitated. "It's busted. Doesn't matter." But he was already turning it in his hands, ear pressed close to the face of the watch. His fingers moved with surgeon-like precision. A small click. Another. He adjusted the knob, tapped the glass, and after a pause, tick, tick, tick. Cassie stared at it. The second hand moved. "You fixed it." He nodded. "The gear was stuck. I heard it catching." She didn't know whether to feel impressed or unnerved. "You were what, a watchmaker before you went blind?" "No," he said, smiling faintly. "Just curious." The next day, it got stranger. Cassie brought home a loaf of bread she'd traded from a food truck guy she used to date. It was squashed, maybe stale, but still edible. "I hope you like it," she said, tossing it down. Elliot ran a hand over the loaf. "Whole wheat, truck brand. Yesterday's batch." Her eyes narrowed. "You smelled all that I used to bake," he replied casually. "That was it." Cassie sat down hard on the overturned bucket that served as a stool. She stared at him. "You're not some random blind guy off the street. I never said I was." "Then, what are you?" He didn't answer. Not then. Later that night, after she stormed out for air, Cassie found herself walking to the far end of the lot, where the street lamps flickered and garbage cans overflowed. Her mind raced. He's too calm, too smart, too aware. Blind or not, he read her like a book. Who listens to the wind to tell direction? Who counts steps to know distance? Who knows how to fix watches, bake bread, and quote Shakespeare out of nowhere? "Hell is empty, and all the devils are here," he'd whispered once, after hearing about her past. Who says stuff like that? When she returned, he was sitting by the candle again, tracing the air with his fingers. "You're angry?" he said, not even turning toward her. "No, I'm—" She paused, sighed. "Okay. Yeah, a little. I don't blame you. You're hiding something, Elliot." He nodded once. "Yes." She blinked. "You're not going to deny it." "What would be the point?" Cassie crossed her arms. "Then why are you here?" "In my broken world?" Elliot turned his face toward her, his voice suddenly lower. "Because I was tired of living in mine." Silence. Not the kind that felt awkward. The kind that meant something cracked open. From that night on, Cassie stopped asking questions out loud, but her thoughts screamed louder. Who is he? Why does he know so much? Why doesn't he panic when the world around him crumbles? And why? Why does she feel safe when he's near? She didn't invite him to stay longer. She didn't need to. Every morning he was still there. Every night he was still listening. The blind man who knew exactly where she hurt and exactly how to sit still when she broke down crying, but never said a word. Just breathed with her. Present, real. And slowly, Cassie began to forget what it meant to be completely alone. Because somewhere in the silence between them, something unfamiliar started to grow. Trust. Cassie stood behind the service doors of the Marlowe Grand Hotel, clutching a tray of dirty champagne flutes in both hands. Her apron was stained. Her hands smelled like lemon soap, and her shoes were 2 sizes too big. But none of that mattered. She had a job. One night, $80 cash. Enough to eat for a few days. Maybe even get that heater fixed back at the unit. The ballroom was buzzing music's soft glasses, clinking laughter bouncing off gold-trimmed walls. It was the kind of place Cassie only saw from the sidewalks. Velvet curtains, suits with names on Forbes, high heels she couldn't even pronounce. She was invisible here, and that worked just fine. Until she saw him, her breath caught in her chest. Across the ballroom, walking between a pair of security guards and flanked by 2 executives, was Elliot. But not her Elliot. This man wore a fitted gray suit, clean, sharp. He moved with purpose, his steps firm. His hair was combed back, no longer wild. His face shaved smooth. His chin held high. There was no trace of the blind stranger sitting quietly in her storage unit, counting wind directions and fixing broken watches. This Elliot didn't wear a cane, and he wasn't wearing his dark glasses. His eyes clouded, yes, but somehow steady, searching. Cassie felt the tray shift in her grip. Her pulse raced. She ducked behind a curtain, hiding. What the hell was going on? "You recognize him," a voice beside her whispered. Cassie turned. A server, maybe mid-30s, adjusted her bow tie and leaned closer. "That's Elliot Quinn," she said, nodding toward the center of the ballroom. "CEO of Quinsight. He went missing last year, after some kind of accident. Everyone thought he was dead." Cassie's mouth went dry. Quinn. Elliot Quinn. Suddenly the pieces slammed into place. The way he spoke, the way he moved, the quiet confidence, the not quite blind gaze, the ability to fix things without seeing them, the stillness, the secrets, and the lies. Cassie stepped back, the weight of betrayal sinking into her gut like lead. The rest of the night blurred. She moved like a ghost, refilling glasses, wiping counters, while her eyes stayed locked on him. Elliot floated through the crowd like he belonged there. Maybe he always had. Executives laughed at his jokes. Investors leaned in when he spoke. Once their eyes met across the room. Cassie froze. He paused too. But then someone touched his arm and he turned away. No smile. No signal. Nothing. Hours later, the party faded. Cassie stripped off her apron, grabbed her coat, and shoved her tips in her pocket. She didn't take the bus. She walked, fast, furious. Back at the unit, the door was shut. She threw it open. Elliot was sitting on the floor, candle flickering beside him, waiting like nothing had happened. "You lied to me," she said loud. He didn't flinch. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you." "Same thing." He stood slowly. "You weren't supposed to be there." "Oh, I wasn't. Sorry I crashed your secret CEO reappearance gala." "Elliot." He inhaled through his nose, calm as ever. "I needed to go. I had to find out what they were doing with my company. So you just disappear from my life again and show up wearing a suit, acting like the guy who sleeps next to a leaking roof doesn't exist." "I am that guy." "No, you're not. That guy would have told me the truth." Silence stretched. He stepped closer. "Cassie, I didn't want you to see me like that." "Like what?" "Like someone who had everything and lost it. Someone broken, trying to crawl back into a world that didn't want him anymore." Her voice cracked. "I accepted you when you were just Elliot. You didn't even give me a chance to accept the rest." That hit him. Hard. But she wasn't done. "You made me feel like we were equals," she whispered. "Turns out I was just a side street on your comeback tour." Elliot's jaw tightened. He took a deep breath. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He didn't answer. Because he didn't know. Not really. That night, Cassie sat alone under the candlelight, staring at her fixed watch. It still ticked. Steady. Constant. Unlike the man who had put it back together. In one night, the stranger she trusted turned into a man with power, money, and secrets. The Elliot she knew shared her food, her silence, her space. But this Elliot. This one wore a name badge and had security guards. And somehow, that version of him scared her more than the blind man in the alley ever did. The air between them was thicker than the silence. Cassie stood by the doorway of the storage unit, arms crossed, heart pounding like war drums in her chest. Elliot, no longer in his polished suit, but back in his worn hoodie, sat on the crate like he had that first night. But nothing felt the same. The trust had cracked. She couldn't unsee the man from the gala. Couldn't forget how he ignored her in that room full of billion-dollar handshakes. Couldn't ignore how little she'd actually known him at all. "You used me," she said finally. Voice low, flat, too calm to be calm. Elliot didn't flinch. "No. You stayed here, ate my food, listened to my stories, let me think you were just some stranger in the dark. But the whole time you were what? Watching me, using this place to hide until your big return." "I wasn't hiding," he replied. "I was breathing, for the first time in a year." "Don't give me that poetic crap, Elliot. You lied." He stood slowly. "I didn't lie. I escaped." "There's a difference." Cassie's jaw clenched. "So what was I then? A pit stop? A distraction?" He stepped closer. "You were the only person who didn't care about what I had been. You just saw me as a man." She shook her head bitter. "That's the problem. I did see you, and now I can't trust anything I saw." He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "You were the first person who didn't ask what I'd lost. You asked what I needed." Those words hit like a gut punch. Cassie looked away, eyes burning. But she wasn't crying, not this time. Across town, in a skyscraper built with glass and arrogance, Jordan Quinn raised a whiskey glass to a team of smiling men in tailored suits. A contract sat open on the polished table, the Quinn site logo stamped in gold at the top corner. Jordan's voice was smooth, confident. "We sign next week. Once it's done, the Shell Corp moves the patents offshore, dissolves R&D, and we pocket the licensing." "But Elliot," one of the execs asked. Jordan laughed. "Please. The man can barely see straight, let alone fight a legal battle." Back at the unit, Elliot sat again, this time with his head low, fingers fidgeting with the edge of a worn glove. "They're going to sell it," he said. "Everything my father built. My name's still on half the patents, but Jordan's found a loophole. He's selling it through a shell company out of the Caymans. Once it's signed, it's gone." Cassie didn't respond. "I kept quiet, because I didn't know who I could trust," he added. "I thought hiding in plain sight would help me think." Cassie turned. "And what I was part of the scenery. You were the only thing that made it real." That finally cracked her. Cassie walked to the shelf, grabbed the half-burnt candle, and slammed it down. "Then prove it." He looked up. "How you want to save your company? Your legacy. Then stop hiding. Stop disappearing. And let's fight back." Elliot blinked. She nodded. "You're not doing this alone. Not again." That night, they sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, surrounded by Post-its, old blueprints, and a hacked-up laptop Cassie bought with tip money. "I still have admin access to the back-end database," Elliot said. "We built a kill switch into the R&D license protocols years ago. If I can trigger it before they sign it, voids the transfer." "And Jordan doesn't know?" Cassie asked. "No, but I'll need someone inside. Someone who won't draw attention." Cassie stared at the screen. "I can get in," she said slowly. "There's a catering request for a private finance dinner next Friday. I know the guy who assigns kitchen staff." Elliot turned toward her. "That's risky," she smirked. "Everything about you has been risky." They exchanged a look, one heavy with bruised trust, unfinished questions, and something else, unfinished business. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, two people who didn't belong in the same world sat side by side, building a plan that would either destroy them or save everything. The next 4 days were chaos, covert, tense, quiet chaos. Cassie moved like a ghost through the city. She borrowed favors, made deals in back alleys, called in every scrap of goodwill she'd built in the underworld of dishwashers and janitors. Her name wasn't on any real payroll, but she had access, the kind of access cameras don't see. Elliot, meanwhile, was a machine. Blind or not, his mind worked like clockwork. He mapped floor plans from memory, dictated entry codes from 5 years ago, and recited employee patterns like he never left. But this wasn't just some boardroom battle now. This was war, and Cassie was in the middle of it. "Are you sure about this?" Elliot asked, voice low, fingers tracing the edge of an old blueprint. Cassie tightened her ponytail. "No, but that hasn't stopped me before." He smiled at that, a real one. "If this works, it will." She cut him off. "Because I'm not letting your brother sell what's not his to sell." Elliot nodded. "Then let's make sure Jordan hears everything he's not supposed to say." The night of the board dinner came fast. Cassie dressed in a borrowed uniform, black button-down apron, hair tucked neatly under a catering cap. She looked like just another part of the background. That was the point. The Quinsite headquarters shimmered in the evening light, glass, steel, and power. She'd cleaned these halls before, back when her name was just a barcode on a mop cart. But this time, she wasn't here to clean. She was here to burn it down. Security was tighter than expected. 2 guards at every entrance. Face scans, ID checks. But Cassie didn't blink. She moved with trays and wine bottles blending in, invisible once again. In her apron pocket, a micro audio recorder. Voice activated. Tiny. Deadly. Elliot was already inside. He'd entered through the old fire exit, one she had shown him last year, during a night shift back when she'd still believed this place was untouchable. He counted steps, felt for the cracked tile in the hallway, paused exactly 8 feet from the corner, to avoid the security sensor. To the world, he was blind. But in that building, he was home. Cassie slipped into the side hall just as the private meeting began. Through cracked door, she saw Jordan Quinn, taller, colder, sharper than Elliot, laughing with 2 foreign executives. "Signatures go down next week," Jordan said, swirling scotch in a crystal glass. "By the time the media catches on, we'll have moved every patent offshore. Legally clean. Ethically questionable." The other man grinned, and your brother Jordan scoffed. "Blind, broken, has been." Click. The recorder picked it all up. Cassie held her breath. Across the building, Elliot stood still in a dim hallway, listening, his Bluetooth earpiece relaying everything Cassie captured. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but fury. They were going to dismantle everything. His father's legacy. His people. His life's work. Because they thought he couldn't fight back. Because they thought he couldn't see. Cassie returned to the supply closet where Elliot waited, pulling off her apron and slapping the recorder into his hand. "We got it." He smiled. "You did it." "No," she said, voice serious. "We did." She looked at him. "You ready to take this public?" Elliot exhaled slowly. "Yeah. But not through press releases or lawyers." Cassie blinked. "Then how?" He turned toward her face, calm voice low. "I'm going to walk into the shareholder meeting. I'm going to play this tape, and I'm going to make sure every one of them hears my brother sell out the name they trusted." "That'll blow everything open," she said. He nodded. "Exactly." She looked at him, heart pounding. "Then, we finish what we started." Outside, the lights of the city glowed. Inside, 2 people with no reason to believe in each other had become the only thing standing between the truth and its burial. They weren't lovers. Not yet. They weren't partners. Not officially. But tonight, they were something else, a reckoning. The shareholders' conference was scheduled for 900 a.m. sharp at the Quinsite Executive Tower, 27th floor conference room, E. Long table. Wall-to-wall glass. A panoramic view of a city built on ambition and betrayal. Cassie sat outside the doors, disguised again, in a caterer's uniform. But this time, she wasn't here to serve. Inside, Jordan Quinn stood at the head of the table, slick, confident, dressed like power itself. The foreign investors flanked him, papers in hand, ready to sign away a legacy. "Before we proceed," Jordan said, adjusting his cufflinks, "let me personally thank you for trusting me. This transition marks a bold new direction for Quinsite, leaner, faster, global." A woman in a navy blazer raised a hand, and your brother Jordan gave a tight smile. "My brother is no longer part of this company. He's not capable of leading anymore." The room buzzed with light chuckles, polite nods. Until the doors opened, hard. Everyone turned. Elliot Quinn walked in, not with security, Not with a team. Just him, a dark suit, no tie, cane in hand, Cassie behind him holding a small speaker. The room fell silent. The pen froze in Jordan's hand. Elliot's voice was calm. Too calm. "Before you sign anything, I suggest you listen to this." Cassie pressed play. The room filled with static. Then Jordan's voice echoed sharp and unmistakable. "He's blind, broken, a has-been. The company's mine now. Once the signatures are in, we move the patents offshore. By the time the media catches on, it'll be too late." Silence. The speaker clicked off. Jordan's face paled. The investors exchanged stunned glances. One of them leaned back slowly and muttered, "Is that your voice?" Jordan stammered. "This is out of context." Elliot raised a hand. He didn't shout. He didn't blink. He didn't need to. "I may have lost my sight," Elliot said, stepping forward, "but I haven't lost my vision. And I haven't forgotten what this company stands for." One of the older board members asked, "How did you get that recording?" "Does it matter?" Cassie replied from the back. "Or are you more worried it's true?" Elliot continued, voice low but unwavering. "I don't need to see who's standing behind me. I just need to know who casts a shadow." And Jordan, "You've cast nothing but darkness since the day I left." A murmur swept through the room. Jordan tried to regroup. "He's unstable." "You're all letting emotion get in the way of—" No, a woman near the end interrupted. "You used your brother's accident to stage a takeover. You lied to all of us. And you almost sold our research to a shell company overseas," added another. A vote was called, impromptu, immediate. 11 hands went up, unanimous. Jordan was removed. Just like that. Years of manipulation, erased in 60 seconds of tape. After the meeting, the conference room emptied quickly. Whispers, shaken heads, glances over shoulders. But Elliot remained still, hand resting on the edge of the table, breathing in the moment. Cassie stood beside him. "They believed you," she said. He nodded. "No, they believed the truth." She studied him. "So what now?" He turned his head toward her, his expression finally softening. "Now we rebuild." Outside, the city still pulsed like it always did, ruthless, unbothered, fast. But for once, Elliot Quinn wasn't chasing it. He was ahead of it, and by his side, the girl no one expected, no resume, no home, no fancy title, had just helped save a billion-dollar legacy with a $20 recorder and pure guts. She was no longer just a survivor. She was part of the story now. The boardroom was empty. The battle was won. The traitor exposed. The company saved. But in the quiet aftermath, Cassie slipped away. No spotlight. No farewell. No lingering hand on his shoulder. She left the way she had come into Elliot's life, unexpectedly, and without asking for anything. A few blocks down from the Quinsight Tower, Cassie sat alone at a bus stop. No rain this time, just silence and a sunrise struggling to cut through the gray skyline. In her lap, the same hoodie still stained at the cuffs. In her pocket, a slip of paper, Elliot's address, scribbled in his own writing, crooked and precise. But she didn't plan on using it. He had his world back, the boardroom, the legacy, the vision. She still didn't know what her world even was. When Elliot returned to the storage unit later that day, the candle was gone, the blanket folded, the space empty. No note, just absence. He stood there for a long time, hands at his sides, breathing in the stillness that used to comfort him, and now just echoed. 2 days later, Cassie finally answered his last message. "I didn't stay because I didn't belong. I helped you find what you lost, but I still haven't found what I'm looking for." She didn't expect a reply, but one came. "If you ever want to look for that answer somewhere, with warm coffee and someone who believes in you, come back. No pressure, just possibility." Weeks passed. Elliot started showing up at the small cafe on 3rd Street every morning at 8:15. No assistant, no briefcase, just black coffee. 2 cups, one for him. One he left across the table untouched, but never forgotten. He never asked the barista to clear it. He waited. And then, one morning, without fanfare or slow-motion music, she walked in. Same ponytail, same stubborn eyes, different coat. No words at first, Just a hand reaching for the untouched cup. Warm, real, home. Elliot smiled. He didn't need to see her to know the girl who helped him find his way back to everything had finally started finding her own. 3 months passed. Cassie's life didn't magically transform. There was no lottery ticket, no miracle check in the mail. But there was progress, and for her, that was more than enough. She found a steady job at a bookstore cafe on 12th and Vine. The pay was humble, but she earned it. Every cup she poured, every shelf she dusted, she did it on her own terms. She even managed to rent a tiny room above a laundromat, a place with a lock, a window, and for the first time in years, a real bed. It wasn't much, but it was hers. One evening, tucked between a stack of return books, she found an envelope. No name on the front, just her initials, CR. Inside was a handwritten letter. "There's a small cafe opening next week. Name's Second Sight. No dress code, no application. Just one unspoken requirement. You show up as exactly who you are. You're always welcome there. EQ." Cassie stood in the middle of the cafe, heart thudding, and then she smiled. The cafe sat on a quiet corner of downtown. No giant sign, just a hand-painted wooden board that read Second Sight, coffee, conversation, second chances. She stepped inside. Warm brick walls, worn leather chairs, plants trailing from open windows. It didn't feel like a business. It felt like a promise. Behind the counter stood Elliot. No sunglasses, no shield. Just him, flawed, steady, real. His eyes still clouded, yes. But when he turned toward the door, his lips curved slightly. "I heard you walk in," he said. Cassie blinked. "You recognized my steps?" He nodded. "My vision didn't come back. But when I hear you, it's clearer than any sight I've ever had." Her throat tightened. She walked toward the counter, stopping just in front of him. A heartbeat passed. Then she smiled, soft and mischievous. "Today I can wash the mugs," she said. "But maybe by tomorrow I can learn how to make the coffee." Elliot chuckled. "Deal." The bell above the door jingled as the first customers of the day walked in. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. Cassie rolled up her sleeves. Elliot reached for the mugs. And just like that, the cafe opened. Not just the doors, but a new chapter. Not about past titles or lost fortunes, but about seeing each other clearly, honestly. And this time, no one was running anymore.